Hello and welcome to the latest Science for Sport podcast. I'm your host Matt Solomon, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Tommy Munday. So Tommy works under the banner of Sharp Training Systems out of Sheffield in the UK. Previously he's worked with Boxing Science and with Manchester United women's football team. During that time, he's honed his craft in jump profiling, and that's what we're here today to discuss. So without further ado, it's time to welcome Tommy onto the show. So Tommy, welcome to the Science for Sport podcast. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you very much for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity to come and have a chat about all things training. So, good stuff.
Excellent, mate. Thank you very much for joining us. So can you give us a quick introduction as to who you are and what you've been up to until now?
So, I'm Tommy. I'm a strength and conditioning coach. I've been accredited with the UKSCA for about 5 years now, just over 5 years. At the moment, I'm kind of working under the banner of Sharp Training Systems, which is my own personal brand. That encompasses my passion to be able to help motivated athletes and coaches get the most out of their physical performance. Really, a lot of that removing the guesswork. So, 3 branches of that is testing, training, and consultancy as well. So, in the space of a week, I'm working with players, teams, athletes, coaches, one-to-one in small group sessions as well, and really just all themed around physical performance. So, really enjoying that at the moment. Prior to that, I've been working at Boxing Science in Sheffield. I've spent the last 2.5 years there with Danny Wilson and Alan Ruddock. And then I suppose where I really cut my teeth with the role was working with the women's setup at Manchester United with their first under-21s academy side, which was a brilliant opportunity to really just get stuck in and try things out, make a lot of mistakes, but adjust things on the fly and really, like I say, cut my teeth with the role with some fantastic athletes, fantastic physios, coaches, real talented group of people, and I feel like we did really good work there as well. So aim is to kind of take my experiences so far, and then also the systems of world leading coaches from over the decades, Charlie Francis, Altis, Speedworks, whatever it is, even some of the leading stuff in psychology and motor learning and stuff like that, bring it all together and apply it best I can to the athletes and coaches that I'm working with now.
Absolutely excellent, mate. And obviously we're here to discuss jump profiling. So before we get into what it is and all that kind of stuff, how have you used that before? So you've used that, I imagine, at Man United women's team, right?
Yeah. So started to develop it there, and then more developing it with kind of the boxers over the last 2.5 years as well. So probably been really getting stuck into this stuff for about 3.5 years, I'd say. So just identifying someone's capacity to be able to produce force quickly when their own body weight is the only thing they've got available. So really, I think people will have their own data on this. People will have kind of their own ideas. There's loads of stuff in the literature. There's loads of stuff, case studies, all that. But there's generally strong correlations between measures of multi-directional speed and counter movement jump height. So that is, the higher you can jump, the better your capacity is to be able to sprint fast, change direction quickly. That's generally, logically, it makes sense because we can put more force into the floor. But with my data in different cohorts, I'm generally finding like kind of 0.5 to 0.65 R squared values. So generally strong correlations. And I'm not necessarily seeing that for other things. I'm not necessarily seeing it for reactive strength. I'm not necessarily seeing it for maximal strength or kind of maximal power or maximal impulse and things like that as well. So it's a metric that I consistently go back to and is a good place to start for me.
And why is it then important? Because obviously it sounds good, there's a correlation and potentially there has some link to some other cool parameters and things that you want to have in physical performance, but why is then jump profiling important for athletes and coaches?
So for me, I'm getting an athlete for the first time, and if we agree that a higher vertical jump would represent better capacities and gives me a clue that they've got a better chance of being good at their sport. So I'm referencing multi-directional speed a lot, but if we look at the research that's coming out in golf recently, some stuff like that jump impulse, so essentially how high you can jump interacting with your body mass, really being a strong predictor of club head speed and therefore carry distance and all things like that. If we're agreeing that it's important, and it's something that will give an athlete potentially a better chance to technically and tactically excel to the best of their ability. I think it's important to understand why an athlete is jumping as high as they are jumping, and also how they're jumping as high as they are jumping as well. And I'll do that by changing the constraints of the task. So we'll start off with the hands on hips counter movement jump. Then we'll go into a hands on hips pause squat jump. So what are you like where I take the opportunity for a stretch reflex away? And then we're going to load them up as well. So we're going to do loaded jumps. We're going to start maybe with just body weight hands on hips, and then we might go 20 kilo check bar, and then we might go 40 kilos, 60 kilos, 80 kilos, maybe depending on the athlete. Now, what are you like when we add load to you? Everyone's going to drop off, but do you drop off, do you fall off the edge of the cliff? Or is it a shallow, controlled drop off? And then looking at that, we've changed the straight constraints of the task. We've looked at have, when I give you more time to produce force, or when I take away a stretch reflex, how does that change, and how are you now able to maintain as close as you can to your counter movement jump? And then that's going to give me a good indication, really, of what training we do going forward, because everyone needs to get better. If someone's coming to me for 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever it is, or going to stick around with me for the year, they need to get better. So I need to know what training, what exercises, what intensities are going to give them the best chance of getting better. And jump profiling is where that starts with. I'm a big believer that not everyone needs to get stronger. I think maximum strength training can make an athlete worse if delivered at an inappropriate time. So really, this for me is just identifying what's the athlete in front of me, and how am I going to give them the best chance of succeeding over the next 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, whatever that is.
And you mentioned things like stretch loading cycle, elastic energy. What kind of physiology then underpins this? Because those are different types of jumps that you mentioned. Obviously, you have like a squat jump compared to counter movement jump and loaded jumps. What's happening physiologically which then differentiates these things?
Yeah, so I suppose we can look at really like the stuff from A-level PE or BTEC sport, whatever level. We've all been taught about like the kind of stretch reflexes and stuff like that. I won't go into too much, but I suppose when we dip down aggressively and we load a muscle and we create an aggressive stretch on that muscle, that sends a signal to the brain where it goes, oh, come neck. I don't like that. Let's create some tension to be able to get back out of that. So that, I suppose that's that little bit of a recoil. So certain athletes, when you take that stretch reflex away from them, there's barely any difference between the two jumps. So they're pretty much just as good with a pause squat jump as they are with when you give them the opportunity to load. Now, other athletes, when you take that opportunity to load and stretch away from them, they're not very good at generating force quickly from a concentric start or from a dead start, and they're not able to generate concentric force rapidly. And I think that's really interesting, like kind of why that is. So that stretch reflex, certain athletes are maybe able to handle a bigger one, maybe able to handle more forces, whatever that is, whether they're able to generate eccentric force more quickly, but it is a very, very trainable quality. Now, so for me, my general rule of thumb, like I say, it might change ever so slightly on depending on the sport, but if someone's got over a 10 to 15% difference between their counter movement jump and their pause squat jump, that's generally agreed that they've got an efficient they're creating an efficient stretch reflex. So they're able to handle high eccentric forces and able to get out of that, use that elastic stretch response, whatever we're going to call it. If that difference is under 10%, then that tells me that they're not great at handling those eccentric forces to be able to get out of it. They're not able to use that stretch reflex efficiently, but they might be really good at generating concentric force very quickly off the mark. So that 10 to 15% rule for more highly trained athletes, I'd eat towards 15%. For less trained athletes, more like 10%. That is going to tell me, are we going to go more eccentric theme training, which teaches them to load a little bit more, or are we going to go concentric theme training, which is going to teach them to get off the mark more quickly? But that makes sense. I've rambled a little bit.
No,
See how we
not
go.
at all. I think that makes a lot of sense. So, excuse me. So, how do these the jumps then relate to performance? So, you've got different types of jumps, and depending on the ratio between the outcomes of those, you can train differently. But how do they then relate to performing?
So I've done a good kind of good case study on this over the past probably past 2 years. So I've worked with 15 decent level sprinters. So the fastest lads would be kind of 6.6 in the 60 meters, and then the slowest to be 7.5. So all like quick lads. I'm really like looking at what are the predictors of 60 meter sprint time and around the time that I tested them. So what was their competition performance and what were their times. Now what we're finding, and I'm working with a really talented, brilliant coach and a guy called Alexander Vidal in Manchester in terms of this, and he's absolutely outstanding. It's brilliant questions. Just his coaching, his understanding of everything. He's always pushes me to do better work. So this is what it's come off the back of. But really, like with these 15 sprinters, what were the best predictors of 60 meter sprint time? So counter movement jump was coming out as a very strong predictor, actually stronger than what I thought it would be. So I think explaining about 60% of the variance in 60 meter sprint time. Squat jump was about half of this, so I'm less bothered about squat jump in terms of an actual performance predictor, let's say, or performance measure. But I am interested in an athlete's squat jump compared to the counter movement jump. Now, where this gets more interesting is we looked at the peak impulse someone is able to generate in a loaded jump profile. So think of this as peak power, but I just measure this in a different way. So really, what's the most amount of weight they can get on the bar and still move it quickly. That was a small predictor of 60 meter sprint performance, but it was a moderate predictor of counter movement jump performance. So then I'm going, right, this might help counter movement jump might help this. Now, where it gets even more interesting, we take a step back, is we can predict peak force from a loaded jump profile, so we can predict maximal strength using the jump height versus load trend. Now, maximal strength isn't a predictor of 60 meter sprint performance. It's a small predictor of counter movement jump performance. It's a moderate predictor of peak impulse, but then, like I say, there's no relationship between 60 meter sprint performance and maximal strength. That's not to say there's not value in training that, because we know maximal strength might help maximal impulse might help counter movement jump performance, counter movement jump performance might help 60 meter sprint time. So I looked at this for reactive strength as well, and I wasn't able to find a relationship as well between 10.5 RSI and 60 meter sprint time, which surprised me a lot, because logically you go, yeah, that does make sense, but that's not to say that I'm not measuring that. I don't see value in that, but really the metric I'm interested in training and interested in measuring and that gives me the best chance of a clue for success is counter movement jump performance. And I've found that in other environments as well. I found that with the girls at United, counter movement jump is a strong predictor of multi-directional speed. So, any other metric other than CMJ, I'm just looking at to try and work out how are we going to get this athlete to have a better CMJ, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm rudely interrupting to make sure you're up to date and aware of the Science of Sport Coach Academy. The Coach Academy is an overgrowing library of sports science courses which are broken down into bite-sized chunks. So if you're enjoying today's podcast and you want to get your hands on some more great sports science information, all you have to do is hit the link in the show notes. You can get into the Coach Academy completely for free for the next 7 days. What's more, every time you complete one of the courses, you'll get a certificate of completion which will prove your ongoing education. So, in just a few minutes' time when the podcast is finished, hit that link to get in there completely for free. So, provided that people are now convinced, because it sounds like a convincing argument, like great logical steps. What do people need to then start testing this? Because there's going to be people listening and they're like, right, okay, that's great, but I don't have loads of fancy equipment. How do people then test their counter movement jump or that range of jumps that you just described at performance?
Yes. So for me, it's just doing the best with what you have and the time you've got available to do it. Because, like, I could tell everyone, use my jump, It's brilliant. It's on the App Store. Like, I've done this with my jump before. That's brilliant in a one-to-one session, but it's not great if you've got 20 people in front of you. Like, there's ways around that. You can film the jumps. Like, I've done it where I filmed the jumps before, like I film the jumps during the session and I analyse them after. The thing is, with that, there's no immediate feedback, which is a really powerful thing in jump testing. Like, if I start from the most basic solution, my most basic solution would be to do a broad jump and to get an indication of an athlete's maximal strength of a trap bar deadlift. A trap bar deadlift 1RM, or at least predict their trap bar deadlift 1RM from their training maxes. So I'll start in the most basic one. So for me, my standards, and kind of agreed within the literature, 50 to 55 centimetre hands on hips counter movement jump. That's a pretty good place to start for, or a pretty good target to work towards for a senior male team sport athlete. 40 to 45 for a senior female. Now, using the loaded jump profiling and the data I've got and where I've correlated that with people's trap bar deadlift 1RM, to hit that, you probably need to you can hit this without having a strong trap bar deadlift, but to put max strength beyond doubt has not been a limiting factor. You want to deadlift about 2.5 times your body weight for a male athlete, 2.0 for a female athlete. So they'd be quite good places to start. Now, if you can't test counter movement jump, a broad jump is the next best thing. So there's generally strong correlations between broad jump and counter movement jump as well. What I found is that 50 to 55 equates to around 2.65 meters for a male athlete. So your first step would be like, if you can't jump 2.65 and you can't trap bar deadlift 2.5 times your body weight, your best chances is just to get stronger. However, if you can trap bar deadlift 2.5 times your body weight, but you can't broad jump 2.65, it's more ballistic. You probably need more ballistic training. Your muscles are quite good at generating force. You just need to access this a little bit more quickly. So that would be kind of my most basic. If someone was asking me, like, what can I do today to identify what I need to work on? And I've done a couple of videos on this on Instagram where I'll go into that on more detail. I can link that in your show notes or what have you. But from there, you've got things like force plates. I don't personally use force plates. I like, right now, where I'm at, I believe that I can answer the questions that I want to answer without them. As long as you're tight on your jump protocols, as long as you're tight on the execution of the tests, I use Output Sports and Opt2Jump if it's available. Like, Output Sports, I'm absolutely loving because the way it communicates the data back to you, you can show it to an athlete straight away. It's like visually brilliant. I'm tight on my testing as well. Like, I'm bang at it in terms of making sure people are doing these jumps properly and getting the most out of those sorts of tests. So I'm using Output Sports for counter movement jump, pause squat jump, and then a loaded jump profile. That's then giving me the information I need. And then a loaded jump profile, I just use an Excel tool, which I'm happy to link in as well. That's available to download for free, just for people to kind of play around with on that.
Absolutely excellent. So when you have all of this data, right, like you've collected it, you've got your even if you don't have the super interesting jump mats and force plates and all that kind of stuff,
yeah,
there's a rule of thumb that people can use that's brilliant. When you collected it, how do you adjust then your training based on the results? I think you've alluded to some general strength stuff, but what does that look like when you're in a training session?
Yeah, so someone's come in for the first time and really like, I'm looking at the counter movement jump. What is it? So let's say I'll go for easy numbers because I'm not the best at maths, but let's say they're jumping 45 centimeters in a counter movement jump. But the difference between the two jumps, when I did the pause squat jump, let's say it was less than 10%. I'm going, right, we know we need eccentric training to start off. Now, right now, just from those two tests, I don't know, does it need to be heavy? Or does it need to be fast? Does it need to be more ballistic? So then we do the loaded jump profile. So this is where I use Carmelo Bosco's research. I've probably done about 120 loaded jump profiles with people over the past 3 years. He uses a cutoff point of his Bosco index, he calls it, is 33%. So I'll explain that a little bit more. What you do, you can use the jump height versus load trend line, and it's normally a very strong linear trend. You use that trend line to predict what someone will jump with 1 times additional body weight on the bar. So let's say they're 60 kilos, they're jumping 45 centimeters. With 1 times their body weight on the bar, the mean, like kind of median, what someone would normally jump with that, who has a balanced profile, would be 33% of that, which is about 15 centimeters. So if you're weighing 60 kilos, let's put 60 kilos on the bar, you should be able to jump 15 centimeters. Now, if you can jump way beyond that, we've got someone that's jumping 20 centimeters. They're quite good at expressing. When you give them more time to generate force, they're quite good. They're probably quite a strength dominant profile. So they're able to generate a lot of force when you give them time and mass to do it. But when only their own body weight is available and less time to do that, they're not great at kind of generating that force, as great as generating that force. So they probably need more ballistic training. Now, let's say we've got the same athlete. They jump 45 centimeters, hands on hips. Then with 60 kilos on the bar, they were only jumping, let's say, 5 centimeters. So like maybe like less than almost 10%, which I get profiles from people are. So they're pretty good at expressing force quickly, the force that they are able to generate that quite quickly. But the ceiling on that, they're more of a speed dominant jumper. They're not able to kind of handle that. They fall off the edge of a cliff. So basically, off those two tests, I can go, right, are we going eccentric or concentric? And then are we going max strength or ballistic? So then someone goes into one of 4 categories for their key development exercise. So that is eccentric ballistic, eccentric strength, concentric ballistic, concentric strength. And then there's different development exercises that are themed around that I will typically do twice a week. Twice a week for 4 weeks on those exercises with adjusted volume and things like that. We'll load them up for 3 weeks, accumulate more volume, then we'll back off the volume, increase the intensity. Typically, I'm seeing improvements of 7 to 17% in the space of a month. Obviously, the newer the athlete is, the newer the athlete is, and the lower their training age, that's probably going to be closer to 17%. If they're a little bit more highly trained, they've done S&C quite well for a number of years, they're more strength trained, they're more plyo trained, that's probably going to be closer to 7%. But this all started because I was having athletes come in and not make improvements, and the question was like, why aren't people getting better? And there's all this stuff around like, oh yeah, we're getting non-responders to training, but realistically, like for me now, I'm just realizing it's just inappropriate programming. So I'm doing this time and time again, and I'm finding that it's working. And really, I'm yet to have a month since I've been doing this in the last 3 years where someone hasn't got better. And it just helps me identify what it is exactly they're working on. So just some examples of some exercises. So let's say eccentric ballistic, that'd be something like a depth jump, or maybe we're doing a trap bar counter movement jump. Maybe concentric ballistic would be those same movements with a pause, or for example, a trap bar jump from the floor, from a dead start, and then maybe once they start getting better at that, I'm going to reduce the range. If it's concentric strength, probably a trap bar deadlift or a rack RDL or a paused box squat or an Anderson squat, something like that might be good. Or if it's eccentric peak force or eccentric strength, we're probably going to be doing something like a box squat touch and go, or an RDL, or something where they've got a downwards movement to reverse and get back out of. And then there's obviously ways of overloading that with eccentric overload training once the athlete is more highly trained. But yeah, all in all, I know I've rambled a little bit there, but yeah, that's what I'm doing, putting an athlete into one of those 4 categories for their development exercise for the CMJ.
And obviously, when we're trying to bring that together, right, I want to give people a bit of an idea of what a training session with you looks like. So
yeah,
you've just gone through some of those different boxes. If you select one of those boxes and you're like, okay, we'll pick an athlete who's going to hit one of those, can you walk us through what a full session with you would look like so people get an idea of, like, they come into the gym, Tommy, morning mate, what are we doing?
So yeah, I've got a couple of kind of good case studies which I've done recently. So one athlete came back as there's very little difference between the CMJ and they're called squat jump. So eccentric training, brilliant. I've got that written down for the testing. And they were really strong, real strength dominant profile. I think they were jumping really high still with 1 times the body weight on the bar. So eccentric ballistic. So their first session, we did some kind of depth jumps in the warm-up as more of a kind of speed exercise. And the key development exercise, I'm concerned with increasing the amount of impulse they're able to generate with an eccentric component to it. So they were doing trap bar jumps at an optimized load for them where they produced the most amount of impulse. So I think that was about 50 kilos. You know, the way I work on session 1, we keep doing reps and we keep doing sets until they drop off. So this is individualizing the volume, so it's completely perfect for that athlete. Now, this is obviously brilliant for me in a one-to-one environment. It might not work as well in teams, but I find this works really well for me. So basically, set 1, he goes 22, 23, 24, and then he goes 22 again, right? Let's have a little rest, 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes. Second set, he goes 23, 24, 23, right? Yeah, let's have a little rest again. He ends up doing about 15 reps across 5 sets. Next week, the job is to accumulate more volume at that same weight above the average of the session, which I think was like 22.5. So we kept doing reps while he was maintaining above 22.5, and we just added 10% more volume, which I think was like 4 more reps. Week after, 10% again. So rather than me going, oh, we'll do 4 sets of 3 or something today, that individualizes volume for that athlete. So sometimes when I'm doing that with someone, it might be 18, they might do 18 reps on session 1. Another athlete, they might do 10 reps on session 1. But generally, it's somewhere between 10 and 20, and we've got a place to start. We've got a bit of a line in the sand, and we know where we're going to overload that athlete from. Accumulate volume. On week 4, maybe we had 5 kilos, maybe we had 10 kilos or something like that, trying to create more impulse, and then retest them again. Have we improved? Chances are, yeah. How much by? Could we have done anything different? Could we have done anything better? That's the key development exercise. Now, that's not the only thing they're going to come and do in the session. There's also stuff they do around movement for potentially injury history, potentially stuff they identify themselves, what they want to work on. But for the most part, that for me is strength training for speed in terms of increasing the amount of impulse that someone's able to generate.
Absolutely excellent. So, Tommy, massive thanks for your time and effort today. It's been a pleasure talking, really interesting. So, where can people find a little bit more about you and what you're up to?
So, I'm a pest. I'm a nuisance on Instagram at the moment. So that'll be sharp.training systems, and that's where you can see some of the stuff that the athletes are doing. I also did I put this method to the test myself over the last month. So I did a 30-day challenge. So my profile came back as I needed concentric ballistic work. So I put that to the test. I did that for a month. I took the tripod and camera to Pure Gym. I was an absolute nuisance, to be honest. But yeah, cracked on with it. And so that's a good little kind of journey to bring that to life around a case study. I'm on Twitter as well, Tommy Munday 1. And then if you just type in my name on LinkedIn, I'll come up on there as well. So if anyone's got any questions off the back of this, some of the videos that I'll probably get you to link in the show notes as well, that I think will bring it to life a little bit more rather than explaining it.
Absolutely brilliant. So, Tommy, massive thanks for your time and effort. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to speaking again soon.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated.
Cheers, buddy. And that's it once again. A massive thanks to Tommy for all of his hard work on today's podcast. I really appreciate it. I'm sure you do at home too. Before you leave, I want to point you in the direction of the Science of Sport Coach Academy. The Coach Academy is an overgrowing library of sports science courses which are broken down into bite-sized chunks. So if you've enjoyed today's podcast and you want to get your hands on some more great sports science information, all you have to do is hit the link in the show notes. You can get in there completely for free for the next 7 days. And what's more, every time you complete one of the courses, you'll get a certificate of completion which will prove your ongoing education. So hit that link in just a few seconds' time. And if you've enjoyed today's podcast, it'd be fantastic if you could recommend it to a coach, a colleague, an athlete, or a friend. That means that we can keep bringing you the best possible guests and best possible content. And that's it. Once again, a massive thanks from me. I'm Matt Solomon for Science of Sport, and I'll speak to you next week.